Hey guys, Checkers here from ClimaxCombo, bringing you an updated deck profile on my Danmachi deck. It's been a while since my first list that came out kind of after the Japanese booster came out, but it's been a while now. The list is a little refined, and yeah, so wanted to do an updated one. The deck is red-blue. It runs the level 1 Bell combo with the door, as well as the level 3 Hestia combo with the Arch or Pants. The deck is heavily event-based, and it is also really consistent. There's a lot to do on your turn, so this deck is super fun. But like all of the lists on the channel, I'm going to go over all the cards, kind of talk about them individually. After that, I'll kind of talk about how I play the deck, some game plans throughout the levels, and lastly, some alternatives you can run for this build, specifically this red-blue build. With that being said, let us go move on. All right, to start things off, this level 0 Hestia, 1500 power. Her first effect is when you play an event, you can draw a card and discard a card, and this can happen up to once per turn. And the other effect is pay 1, rest her to brainstorm. For every climax you hit, you can search for a character. So very, very good brainstorm to have in this build. Plus brainstorm, always good to have in the back row. And the draw 1 ditch when you use an event is phenomenal. You play a lot of events in this deck, so it gets a lot of value. 3 of these Hestia, 1500 power. 2 on play effects. The first one is when you play her, or you can look at the top 3 cards of your library, and you can grab an event from among them and add it to hand, and if you did, discard a card. And her other effect is you can choose one of your opponent's characters, and that character cannot move to another slot until the end of your opponent's next turn. So this card's great for getting some extra milling early on, grabbing events. She lets you grab events, which is nice for the deck because there are a ton of events. And the second effect is great against runners. And it is something to keep in mind for your opponent if they're playing standby, to not put anything in the back row, because then you can kind of choose those characters and they can't move them forward to attack with. So it's pretty annoying to deal with. But yeah, 3 of those. 4 of this Bell, red, 500 power. The first effect is a change with the level 2 Bell, the double R Bell, but I don't run that in this build, so it's not really relevant. And the second effect is you can, at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, you can pay 1, put the top card of your deck to clock, and return him to your hand, as well as 1 other character. So this card is super important for the build. You always want to have, I think it's important to maximize having him. It's essentially +2 at the cost of taking a lot of damage, because you are freeing up your slots, which your opponent should be punishing you for. But it is very important for Danmachi's early game to keep the hand up. So yeah, Danmachi's level 0 is not too great, except for this card. This card is pretty good. 2k power, 3 of these eyes, 2k power. If you have 1 or less other characters, she gets plus 1500 power. And the second effect is at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, you can move her to one of your empty slots that is in front of an opponent's character. So this card is a really good card, or a really good level 0. You definitely want to draw into her early. So there is 3 because you do want 1. But there's not much use outside of the first couple turns for her. 3, 5 is a good number. And her second effect means that your opponent either has to play only 1 character that will reverse her, or the entire field needs to be able to reverse this character. Otherwise, she's sticking around for 1 more turn, which is very nice. 2 of these level 0 Hestia. This is a promo. 2k power, pretty expensive promo, at least when I bought them. Her first effect is when you use an event, you can send her from stage to waiting room, and Second effect is you can rest her to give one of your characters plus 1k. So this card is super good. Yeah, the extra power is nice, but it's really here for the first effect. You're going to be playing events pretty much every turn, so you can kind of convert any extra hand to stock. And if you need an additional stock to kind of get some extra effect off, it is really nice. And yeah, it's just a really good card. So 2 of those. You want to be able to grab one when you need to. One of these Hestia promos, 500 power, 2 on play effects. The first one is you can pay 1, discard a card to look at the top 3 cards of your library and add anything to your hand. This includes events and climaxes. And the second effect is you can pay 1, discard an event to salvage an event from your hand, or from the waiting room, sorry. So this card, I like it a lot, especially in my build, my ratios, because the first effect is great for grabbing climaxes, both early and late game, as well as events. I mean, even if you're not trying to fish for a climax, it's still nice to pay 1 and ditch sometimes. So being able to grab an event in this build is super nice. And the other effect is nice to kind of swap out an event in your hand. Maybe you don't want to... Oh, I'll get into that later. Some more uses with that. But I think I like having one of these. And then one of these T on it. 1k power, 2 on play effects. The first one is you can choose a character in your level slot and a character in your waiting room and swap them. And the second effect is climax swap, pay 1, discard a climax from your hand to salvage a climax. Climax swap is the only reason why she's here. It's super good effect, super clutch when you need it. So yeah, that is it for level 0. There's 17 level 0s. Not too many, but that's because there's so many level 1s. Alright, and moving on to level 1. We have 4 of these 1-0 bells. 4,500 power. His first effect is when he attacks, for each of these firebolt events in your waiting room, he gets plus 1,500 power. And his second effect is a climax combo with the door. When you play this climax, you can either search your deck or salvage from your waiting room this level 1 event, Hestia's Knife. So yeah, that's the level 1 bell, but now time to talk about the events. So the Firebolt event, it's pretty simple. When you play it, you can salvage a character from your waiting room whose level is equal to the number of these level 1 bells in your waiting room. So if you have 3 bells in your waiting room, you can get a level 3, or any character essentially. Even if you don't have any bells, you can still get a level 0. So very useful card. It trades for itself and it's costless, and it helps power up this bell on attack. Very solid level 1 event. And the Hestia's Knife event, 4 of those. Blue, 1-0. It ignores the color ruling, so you don't even need blue, ever, to play this card. You can't play it unless you have a Bell or Hestia, any Bell or Hestia, on stage, and you can't use it as a backup unless you have a Bell on stage. And what this card actually does is when you play it, you can look at up to the top 4 cards of your library, add a character to your hand. So this whole combo is probably the biggest reason why you'd want to play this deck. It's a lot of fun because there's a lot you can do with it. So this bell is great. It can get pretty strong because of these Firebolt events. So he's 4/5 base. With just 1 in the waiting room, he's 6k. With 2, he's 7,500. With 3, he's 9k. And with all 4, he's 10.5. That's before power from any other sources, which is crazy. You're pretty much going to be able to reverse anything with him. And on top of that, he does have a plus climax combo. You can grab these events from anywhere. So you do have to keep in mind how many you have left in your deck, if you've triggered any, stuff like that. Because you want to make sure you can grab all as many as you can when you played the climax. And these cards essentially trade for themselves, so you can. It's a very good plus. It's very good to plus with this event, and this event also is extra milling. So like on your turn, you can use these to mill 4 and get. You can pretty much control your refresh because of this. You get so much milling whenever you want. And you also have. You can also use it as a backup. So if you've just canceled, you can mill to try to get closer to another cancel. It's a very good event, and this whole interaction is super fun. But it doesn't stop there. There's more level 1s. One of these Welfs, 1-0, 2500 power. He gives this event, Rabbit Armor event, -1 cost, making it costless. And the other effect is you can pay 1, rest him, to look at the top X cards of your library and add a level 1 or higher to hand. And X is the number of these rabbit armors in your waiting room +1. And now this rabbit armor event, 4 of these. It's 1/1. When you use it, you can salvage a character from your waiting room and then give one of your characters +4k power. So this event, costless, is kind of nuts. You pretty much are always going to get this wealth and want this wealth in your back row, because having access to another really good event at 0 cost to kind of trade out your hand, and it gives 4k power, this event kind of changes a lot. You don't need as many firebolts to reverse a lot of things, and even when you do have a ton, let's say 9k, you have 3 firebolts in your waiting room, your bell's 9k on attack, 10k with the climax combo, 14k with 1 rabbit armor. It's kind of nuts. You'll be able to kill anything with this bell. And this rabbit armor also lets you grab whatever you want, so you can start to grab level 2s and 3s, because you're not always going to have a lot of bells in the waiting room to grab whatever you want with the firebolt. So this card really kind of brings the consistency into the deck. It's already pretty decently consistent, but then with this level, with adding these level 1s makes it insanely consistent. Your games are going to start to look very similar. But yeah, that is it for level 1. It is 13 level 1s, a ton of level 1s, and a lot of events. Now moving on to level 2, we have one of these Hestia, 2/1, 6500 power. When you play her, you choose one of your opponent's characters and send it to memory, and then your opponent can place that character back on their stage from memory. And the other effect is when she's played, you can pay 1, discard a card to choose one of your opponent's climaxes in their waiting room and shuffle all other cards back to their library. So very nice card to have for decompression. It's nice to play it at level 2. And the other level 2 card is this 2/1 event, Magic Stone. It's essentially a stock swap. You need 3 characters on stage to play it. And when you play it, your opponent takes their stock, puts it back to their library or deck, and shuffles it and puts the same number of cards back to their stock. So kind of different from regular stock swap. Normally, their stock goes to the waiting room, and then the top cards of their deck go to their stock, but a little different. There's ups and downs, I think, to both. But yeah, the idea is kind of the same. You're trying to get rid of their clean stock, decompress them a bit. That's all there is for level 2. Moving on to level 3. 2 of these bell, 3/2. 7500 power. If you have 4 or more characters on stage, he gets -1 level. So he has an easy early play condition. If he has a marker underneath him, he gets plus 1500 power for each marker. He heals on play, And the last effect is on attack, you can take a Hestia's Knife from your waiting room and one other 1-0 event that I don't run in this build and put it underneath him as a marker. And yeah, that's it. So this card is really good. It's super easy condition for an early play. You get an extra heal, a little bit of compression if you're attacking with him before refresh. He is very weak. He's only 9k, so you kind of need rabbit armor or other sources to kind of reverse other typical early plays, but he's not really here for that reason. He's just here for an easy heal early, which can make or break certain games because you want to stay alive for as long as possible. You don't ever want to be behind with this deck. And then lastly for level 3, the boss monster, level 3 Hestia. So she's blue, 8500 base. Her first effect is she gets plus 1k for each of your back row characters, making her 10-5 base very easily. Second effect is stock heal. When she's played, you can discard a card from hand to put the top card of your clock to your stock. And her last effect, she climax combos with the pants. When she attacks, you can give one of your characters +1 soul, and the effect of if their damage is cancelled, you can deal 2 damage to your opponent. So this combo is super good for finishing out the game. You can, because you give something +1 soul, there's kind of a lot of combinations you can do if you're playing multiple of these, and I'll go into that later, all the different things to keep in mind for that. But this is pretty much your finish, and it is a very good finisher. 4 of those. So yeah, that's it for level 3, just 6 level 3s. And then 4 of each of the respective climax combos, 4 door, 4 pants. All right, and now I'll go on to how I play the deck. And I'll mention a bit about mulliganing. So early on, you're pretty much fishing for these level 0s for the most part. Eyes is going to be like your best opener. She's your best opener for sure if you're going first. But still, she's really useful for the early game. And as far as your hand is concerned, you do want to prepare it for level 1. As soon as you hit level 1, you want to combo. So you're definitely not letting go of any climaxes. But you do have pants triggers, so if you do have 2 early or something, or you feel like you can grab it later, that is something to keep in mind. You want to ditch a climax to have just in case you pants early. But I'll generally hold on to the events a bit more. They kind of trade for themselves later on. It's easier to grab the bell from waiting room than it is to get these events. So that's just something to keep in mind for the opening hand. But level 0, like I said, if you're going first, your best opener is definitely this. But even if you're going second, this is probably pretty awesome as well. This bell enables you to kind of attack with a full field early. Your level 0 in the deck, and overall in Danmachi, is very weak. You're gonna get, all your characters are pretty much gonna get reversed except for this Eyes, which is why I like running her. But this bell enables you to kind of swing with the full field, and then you can just kind of replenish your hand. This also combos well with this level 0 Eyes. She can kind of move. She has her whole stage to move around and survive another turn. So I think combining the Eyes with this bell is pretty cool, and I like to run that. He also lets it so that you're not punished for not drawing into any other cards. Like you definitely want to have the Brainstorm in your hand to play it later on, but you can use it as an attacker and then get it back to your hand later, so you aren't really sacrificing it. And then you can also clock the bell for red later when you level up. So there's a lot of like synergy with this lineup. I think running this bell along with the Eyes, it kind of makes your terrible level 0 early game like survivable. You know, you can get by with it. Even taking the extra damage is not too big of a deal, because once you hit level 1, you have a lot of control over the state of your deck. And now it's time to move on to that. So, throughout early 0 and level 1, you definitely are trying to look out for this 1-0 wealth. You will always, the instant you're able to grab it, you will. Like if you can search it with the brainstorm, you have a salvage. You get it into your waiting room, and you can salvage it already. It's very important. As early as possible, you want to be able to start playing your rabbit armors for free. But besides that, your goal is to essentially do this climax combo every turn. This bell, you're pretty much guaranteed to reverse anything because of the way the firebolts work and give them power. So it's very, very beneficial to hit level 1 second, because even against decks like have standby or really strong level 1s, they're still going to get reversed. So it's very advantageous to you to be level 1 second, which is admittedly a little hard to do sometimes because you're taking extra damage from this bell. But honestly, it really just depends on what is more valuable in the matchup you're playing. But yeah, so you're pretty much, from here on, it's like you're playing events to guarantee that you get as many bells off on your turn as you can. Keep your hand up with the Hestia's knives. These things are super valuable. They give you so much milling. You're going to be able to refresh on demand, which means you're going to be able to compress your deck in the most opportune moments as possible. Like you're looking out for a lot of clock damage on your stage, a lot of stock, a lot of hand, and then you can refresh with the nice setup. You have control, complete control, which is great. But you can also use this as a backup to kind of get closer to cancels. I mean, there's so much you can do. You can hold on to these firebolts and these rabbit armors in certain matchups, like you're playing against standby, have really strong targets, so you're going to want to reverse them. There's a lot of power with this starting at level 1. You're essentially, your goal is to be able to reverse their entire board no matter what, and control the state of your deck to make sure you're like the compression is good and that you're getting a lot of extra cancels. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can do. The Hestia being able to draw 1 ditch per turn is great. You can dig for climaxes. With that, you can filter out your hand of climaxes, and you can also use it on your opponent's turn when you back up. So sometimes I will just back up, use this for the sake of getting an extra draw ditch, trying to draw into climaxes for the next turn. Because sometimes it doesn't taking a little bit more damage won't matter. Like if you hit level 1 first or second, I mean, when you just hit level 1, you have a fresh clock. Taking extra damage is fine at the cost of, grabbing a climax and getting your combo off the next turn. There's stuff like that. The wealth is a nice way to help pay out climaxes and get an extra plus each turn. He can grab level 1s or higher, so you can grab any of the events in the waiting room, or not in the waiting room, but you can grab any event, which is great because they all trade for themselves. So there's really no downside to kind of using all your tools. With that being said, when you have a lot of milling and there are times when it's press your luck. You might hit a climax when you don't want to, and that might screw you over, but it's also very rewarding when that doesn't happen. So there is a learning curve with so much moving parts, but overall, I think it is really strong once you get used to it. And another thing I'll mention is, since you can use these backups, you can use these as backups. This is actually something I didn't even really think about till recently. So you can use this Hestian knife as a backup. So when you use this card to attack, it's probably gonna die. But if you use this as a backup, you can just send it to stock, and you can kind of you kind of blocked with it. It got reversed, but then you can still send it to stock. There's no like requirement for it to be standing or rested or anything like that. So this just helps convert extra hand to stock, which is great. Extra compression, there's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. Starting at level 2, you have access to your decompression tools. You can kind of grab this Hestia wherever you want. Level 2 is not too difficult to guarantee with the firebolts. And I mean, you have other ways you can search, you can salvage it with triggers. So always keep that in mind. If you have a good opportunity to use this, you will definitely want to. It can get a lot of extra damage in by decompressing your opponent, which is phenomenal. It's a little harder to hold on to the Magic Stone because it's an event. You can't just grab it whenever you want. But there are ways to grab it earlier. So you can grab it with the Wealth. You can grab it with that level 0 promo Hestia that I have. I don't look for it, but you can grab it with the other level 0 Hestia. I might as well. Fuck it. These two. So you do have ways to grab it. It's not impossible. So that's why I think it is good to run this. In the meta right now, in like the strong builds in the JP meta, can compress get a lot of clean stock, and it becomes really difficult to kill your opponent in those matchups because Danmachi doesn't really have extra compression, like doesn't have a lot of memory. It doesn't get a ton of stock, so it really helps in those matchups, and I think it's pretty important. And then also at level 2, you have your early play option. Where are you? I do run 2 because if I trigger it early, I don't really want to be forced to pay it out. I'm fine with it just sitting in stock all game. But you do want access to 1 at all times. Later on, the early play heal can come in clutch because you really want to make sure you're not behind with this deck. Your final finish is very good, but it's not a whole lot of extra damage. So, and it's gonna be painful. I'll explain it in a second, but yeah, I'll definitely play him when I want to pay out a climax. Definitely, he's the #1 reason why you get extra compression with the Hestia's Knife. It's just a good early play. So you want to keep that in mind once you hit level 2. You do have access to that. But I mean, you're kind of just holding on, preparing your hand to kind of bust out all your girls. This is the ideal finish, last turn. It's pretty easy to do. You have so many ways to salvage and grab things, trade your hand, filter out your hand. But it isn't guaranteed. I mean, a lot of decks aren't guaranteed, but yeah, I think it's pretty easy to have this as to play of 3 Hestias as soon as you hit level 3. But she only heals by stock healing, which can be really devastating on your hand. So you're not really going to get a good turn after this, I think, unless you get lucky with triggers and your brainstorm, stuff like that. But this is kind of all you need to really finish up the game as long as you didn't fall too far behind. You only need 4 stock to play 3. So let's say you have 4 stock. You pay 1, that's 2 stock. You stock heal, you have 3. You play another one, you're down to 1 stock, but you stock heal, that's 2, and then you can play your last one. So the climax combo is costless. So only 4 stock is a very low resource condition. You do need like 2 extra, you do need all this in your hand though, so you do need to make sure your hand is good. But yeah, that is a big plus, because that means you can keep that in mind and use your stock beforehand to keep yourself in a good position. Keep your deck in a good spot. Keep your hand up by using your stock to plus, because you don't need too much stock for the last turn. And now going into the combo, it is very good for finishing off your opponent. Like I said, it's not too much extra stock because, or too much extra damage, because it's highly likely her attack is going to be canceled. You're giving something +1 soul, and unless your opponent is having a terrible game, that's not really like attacks that are going to be like 3 and 4 aren't always going to be going through. So, but the fact that you get a ping 2 when it cancels is awesome. And it's not just that, you kind of have a lot of freedom to set up your attacks in the way you want to. So for the first example, let's say you decide to go with each individual Hestia pumping themselves. So you're going to have 3 instances of 4 soul. If this cancels, they take 2. 4 soul, 2, 4 soul, 2. So that's a lot of instances of even damage. So even if one of those 4 stick for some reason, that's like pretty huge. And all you need is, like, let's say your opponent is at 3-1, or they're close to refresh, so you only need to do 6 damage for them to die. This is a really good way to do it. You know, you get 3 instances of ping 2 if all those big attacks cancel. If any of them land, that's 4 damage, and you only need 1 of the other ping 2s to land. So that's like an example. You can also stack the effect on one character, so you can actually stack them all on the last attack. So you're swinging with 2 instances of 3, and then the last one is going to be you're swinging for 6. That is probably going to cancel, but then you have 3 instances of ping 2 after, which is, I mean, that's a lot of damage. So 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. That you don't need all of those attacks to stick to really kill them. And you can even side with the last card, so you can get around like defensive backups if they're trying to save it for this one or something like that. You can pump it. You can pump herself if you're trying, like. You have some tools to play around things because of this. You can swing with 1 and then stack it on 1, or stack 2 of them on 1. It really just depends on what numbers you need to kind of finish up the game, and it takes some time to get used to. I don't think I'm particularly that great at it either, but I think that's what makes this combo so devastating, because of how much versatility you have with dealing damage. Other stuff will just be like attack ping 2, attack ping 3, deal 1 if it cancels twice, or some stuff like that. But the fact that she gives an extra soul and ping 2 on cancel is pretty nuts. So yeah, hopefully you win with this. That's kind of the ideal way to play the deck, I think. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful. And I didn't ramble too much. Now for some alternatives. A lot of these cards they're all really good. They all have their purpose, so it really is up to you what you want to run. A lot of preferences. The build that I made is my preference, but I tried to pick all the cards that are still really good, and I have used them all before. So I'll give you my reason as to why I don't really run them. But first of all, this level 0 Aina. She's 500 power. When she's played, you can pay 1, discard a card to search for a character, and her other effect is a Suicider effect. When she gets reversed, the opponent's level 0 gets sent to the bottom of their deck. So this card is really good. It can help set up your hand with the pay 1 ditch search. You don't have a lot of ways to pay 1 early, so this can help with that as well as discarding. And then the Suicide is nice. You get to trade at least for your opponent's characters. And it's bot deck, so they don't get reverse effects. So yeah, it is a good card, and it's very strong. It's stronger against certain matchups. I personally don't run it because I don't think the search is necessary to set up your hand, and um, I'd rather maximize the ratios on the other cards, like having the eyes. It's pretty much you either pick the eyes or you pick this. I like the eyes because I just like strong level zeros. This doesn't feel all too good to be trading with your character or with your opponent very early. But it is still a really good card, and I know a lot of people like to run this. All right, so next up, this level 0. The turn he's played, you can return 2 characters in your waiting room to your deck, shuffle, and then he can side attack without soul penalty. And the other effect is when he attacks, he can give one of your characters plus 500 power per character that you have. Other character that you have. So it can give plus 2k power to something. So that pump it's nice. It's not at all necessary though. And the first effect is really why you would want to run him. This is purely to get the cleanest refresh as possible. The turn you're going to refresh, you kind of want to, or your goal is to really mill out your deck till you have maybe 1 card or 2 cards left that you know are clean, not climaxes. Play him, put 2 characters in, and then when you attack, you have clean stock right before you're going to refresh. So he's there to maximize the compression. I don't think it's that necessary. It is nice. Like, you do get to guarantee 2 clean stock, pretty much, 2 more clean stock, but it's not super necessary, I think. And I find that I don't really have the luxury to grab him for those turns that often. It's already difficult to, it's already like, you're already preoccupied with guaranteeing as many level 1 bells as possible and playing only like one other character for utility's sake. So I don't really like to run him. Level 1 backup, 1-0, 1k power backup, but it's really there for the other effect. When you use this as a backup, you can discard 2 characters to choose one of your opponent's characters whose level is higher than your opponent's character, or than your opponent's level, and put it to the bottom of their deck. So anti-change, anti-early play backup at level 1. You definitely don't need to do this at level 1. Your level 1 bells can kind of reverse anything. And personally, I mean, I've played this because there are a lot of difficult to deal with level 3 early plays, like that have hand encore. That's primarily why you'd want to use this, because it does anti-encore. But ditching 2 characters is way too painful for this deck. And yeah, you get rid of their sticky character, you get rid of that damage for that turn, which can be nice, but it's really just too painful in the hand. So I don't think this, I don't like to use it anymore. One of these 2-1 Aina, 5500 power, double R. She gives all your level 3 characters in front of her plus 2k power, and her other effect is you can rest her. As long as you have an event in your waiting room, you can rest her, choose one of your characters, and for that turn, or for that, during that character's battle, your opponent cannot use events or backups. So this card is very strong for against defensive backups. It prevents your opponent from, using those money backups, no damage, or even the any kind of defensive backups, but it's only for 1 attack, and that can be pretty crazy, but it's not super necessary. You can kind of play around it, and even then it's like you can kind of stack Hestia's effects on things, so you can kind of play around the event. You can kind of force your opponent to play it in a less opportune moment than they would want to. And you can also side with your Hestias as well because they have extra soul. So I find that there are times where you don't necessarily need it. It would be nice sometimes, but it's not. It's a luxury more than a requirement, I would feel. But that also depends on what decks are being played the most. You can, sometimes during the meta, there will be a lot of decks that have stuff like defensive backups, and it is more important to run it. But right now, I don't really run it. So, yeah. But that is something to keep in mind. Lastly, for alternatives, I have this level 3 Bell, 10k power. When he's played, you can look at the top X cards of your deck, where X is the number of characters you have. So if he's played last, you can look at up to the top 5 and grab anything to your hand. Second effect is on attack. If you have a Hestia's Knife in your waiting room, you can pay 1, discard a character to deal 1 damage to your opponent. So this card is a very nice tech level 3 to have. The first effect is nice for grabbing your climaxes. Grab your Hestia Climax for the combo. And the second effect is useful as well. It's just pay 1 ditch to deal 1 damage, which could help you set up better for your last 2 Hestia attacks. But I don't really like to run him because you do need a bit more stock than usual. He's pay 2 and then pay 1 ditch for any usefulness, which I mean you can attack with a Hestia first and then swing with him, pay 1 ditch, and deal 1 damage, but I think you definitely want a third Hestia over this card. Obviously, if you don't even have the combo, it's better to play this card to fish for it, but I think it's easy enough to hold on to the pants in the earlier turns, because you do have pants triggers. You do have, I prefer to run this level 0 PR for I prefer this level 0 PR over this Bell. They kind of serve the same purpose. Your timing just needs to be a little different, and this one's not as good. You can only look at the top 3, but you can use it earlier than level 3, so you can grab the door for Bell's combo. So yeah, that's why I don't really run this card, but a lot of people do. So again, a lot of these cards are preference for you to kind of decide if that's how you want the deck to operate. All right, so that's going to do it for my deck profile. Here's the full list, all the ratios. This is kind of what I've decided I like my ratios at. There's a lot you can do to fix the deck up for your preferences. Overall, I think the current Japanese meta is not too favorable for Danmachi. It struggles against other decks that have a lot of compression and better endgame. But it's still kind of, I mean, it kind of made the meta the way it is, right? It owns standby decks so hard with those level 1 Bells. They're crazy strong, and the deck is super consistent to kind of close out any early leads. So, but it doesn't have any absurd compression or really strong endgame. It just has it's like a solid endgame to close out the game. I think the deck ends up coming together really well, but because of that, it has some glaring disadvantages, but also very strong advantages. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my deck profile, and hope you guys look forward to more games. Peace out.